Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast for June 30th, 2013. This is episode 19. I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Nate Parsons.
This week we are going to be reviewing White House Down, as well as discussing our top 3 movie presidents. To go along with that, we're going to be starting a new series where we're going to be reviewing Guillermo del Toro. And we're going to be starting off with Hellboy this week. And I think we're going to perhaps maybe do Kronos next week. Some of his earlier films that Nate and I aren't too familiar with. But we're going to get a little bit more familiar with him as Pacific Rim's coming out. And I'm personally pretty excited for that. And we're also going to have some fun extra film segments going on later. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. But first, we're going to do White House Down. So Nate, let's get into it.
Here we go.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast, episode 19. Nate, the president, is once again under attack at the White House.
And once again, somebody is at the right place at the right time to save him.
Your hands off my Jordans! Freeze! I said freeze! Shoot him! Don't shoot him! Shoot him!
Well, Nate, we're going to be reviewing White House Down. But before we get into it, how was your week, Nate?
My week was pretty good. I finished up my last week at my old job, and in about a month, I start my new one. So,
yeah, which should be pretty exciting.
Yeah,
that would be very fun. So, all right. Well, we got a lot of things to talk about this week. So let's get into our main review here. White House Down is directed by Roland Emmerich, written by James Vanderbilt, and stars Channing Tatum, Jamie Foxx, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Jason Clarke, Richard Jenkins, James Woods, and a few others as well. So, Nate, what did you think of White House Down?
Oh, White House Down. I didn't go into this movie with a whole lot of expectations, which was a good thing because I hated it. I thought it was a generic, run-of-the-mill action fare. I knew it was directed by Roland Emmerich, like you just said, so I mean, I know his films, what you see is what you get, just lots of explosions, stupid plots, which this movie had, but it was just everything I've seen before, and I just didn't care for it at all. The performances, which I thought the chemistry between Channing Tatum and Jamie Foxx would at least save the movie, if the whole thing wasn't good, I thought at least that would be good. That wasn't. It was just generic, just same old, same old. They had a couple good exchanges, especially one that took place in an elevator shaft, which was kind of funny, but they're few and far between, and it just wasn't working for me. The movie is just way too long. 2 hours and 10 minutes for an action movie is ridiculous, and it wasn't engaging. It was boring. It was slow. The setup seems like it takes forever. The plot, that the way they actually take over the White House was done pretty well, pretty plausible, I guess, by certain standards. I don't think it would ever happen in real life, but it was more plausible than the way they took over the White House in Olympus Has Fallen. But still, overall, I just didn't care for the plot. The only thing I liked about White House Down was James Woods, but we can't really go into him because that would be spoilers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sort of in the same realm as you for this. I don't think this movie is necessarily great by any means. I kind of am going to disagree with you a little bit, though, on some things, and I'll get into some of that here pretty shortly. But I do agree with you that the whole premise of this is pretty unrealistic to begin with. I think we all know that for the most part. And a lot of the same issues with this movie is a lot of the same ones I had with Olympus Has Fallen, in terms of the whole idea is kind of a joke, but if this is the environment that we're walking into, you kind of have to lay down those expectations a little bit. And like you said, the premise here and how they take over the White House is much more plausible and much more, I was much more willing to sit through it than Olympus Has Fallen. And since they're pretty much the exact same movie, I think it's pretty fair to compare the two. Which is a lot of what I did on my review as well. But like you were saying, there's so much here that I didn't really care for either. But that being said, I absolutely liked this much, much better than Olympus Has Fallen. And I'll disagree with you. I liked the chemistry between Jamie Foxx and Channing Tatum. That was actually one of the few things that I really enjoyed here. And I think it's what elevated this film higher than Olympus Has Fallen for me. The story itself isn't a ton better than what we got in Olympus Has Fallen. And in fact, if anything, it kind of takes a little bit of a playbook out of Michael Bay in his film with The Rock. But outside of that, that it wasn't entirely engaging to me. What was engaging to me was these characters that they kind of put into this aesthetic. And I liked Channing Tatum. I liked him in this role. I liked him and Jamie Foxx. I liked how they were able to kind of play off each other. Some of it wasn't as funny, and some of it was a little bit predictable, and other times it was it had me laughing out loud, and I thought it was done really well. I think the parts that you get out of the trailers, yeah, maybe that didn't quite come off as well because I'd seen it before, and maybe it wasn't the best parts of the whole film. But there was lots of other parts that I hadn't seen before that I really enjoyed, and I thought it brought a lot of charm to the movie, which I didn't get in Olympus Has Fallen at all. That movie took itself way too serious and was very amped up from the very beginning, where this movie didn't take itself very serious, at least not the whole time. In fact, the first half of the film, there's lots of jokes, there's lots of times where Channing Tatum, even in the middle of this craziness, is throwing out jokes and trying not to take himself too serious all the time. And because the movie was more light in that fashion, I had more fun with it. I think it knew exactly where it was and where it was going with. There's even some dialogue and some cheesy lines toward the three-fourths of the way through the movie, or even toward the end of the movie, where Roland Emmerich knows exactly where he's at with this movie, and they're throwing those lines out there to be light and to be comedic and to be funny and not take itself too serious. So in that vein, I would give this movie a much, much better grade than Olympus Has Fallen. And I did for the most part. But going back to the takeover of the White House, Nate, let's go into that just a little bit without giving spoilers away. But the craziness here that I had with this, I thought it was a much more realistic, but with the amount of people that are in that building every day. Somehow they all seem to vanish, just leaving these pathetic guards for them to shoot down, which I thought was a little bit absurd. But the execution of it I thought was decently well. But what did you think of like for the entire version of our podcast? Be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or on Stitcher, or check us out online at InSessionFilm.com.